It's Marlon Speaks Live, yeah, I'm saying what they hide. History uncensored, let the real survive. Yeah, it's truth over comfort, I don't pick no side. If it shake the room a little, let the truth collide. Cause it's Marlon Speaks Live, no script, no disguise. I don't sell no lies, just to monetize. Cause the past still breathing and it never dies. Yeah, it's Marlon Speaks Live, now the truth will rise. Yo, it's Marlon Speaks Live, yeah, I'm saying what they hide. History uncensored, let the real survive. Welcome back. Another episode of Marlon Speaks Live. I'm your host, Marlon. Look, man, I just want to thank everybody who's been tuning in. My videos, they going crazy. For me, you know, like 1,000 views is a big deal. So yeah, look, y'all keep on liking, commenting, sharing, subscribing, and I really appreciate this, man. Almost up to 500, and man, that is great for my channel. I just started really doing this a little over a month ago, consistently, and hopefully I'm inspiring others. I noticed that a lot of the people that subscribe to me, they have started channels, and for whatever reason, I'm sure it's your day job, just like me. I got to go back to work tomorrow, and I need to be in the bed, but I'm gonna get about hopefully like 6 hours. Either way, a lot of you guys maybe don't have the time, you know, and I'm gonna tell y'all like this: any chance you get, do your videos, put your content together, put them out, even if it's with a cell phone, if it's with a phone, if it's with I'm telling you, doing videos in a vehicle, for some reason, that, you know, seems to go over real well with people. I think it's because, you know, when you're in your car, I know when I'm in my car, I think a lot when I'm driving. I be thinking, and we can relate to it. It's very relatable. So, yeah, like when you're in your car, before you go in the house after work, you know, before you go to work, do a little video, share your thoughts, man, on a lunch break, share your thoughts. You know, that's what we want to see. I think I love, candid videos of just a person's random thoughts, epiphany, some type of realization, something deep, thought provoking, something that you just want to document for yourself, and if anybody else can get something out of it, that's a blessing. Count it all joy. And at the same time, you can get a following like that. Black Panther, our elder that shared that video, man, he blew up. One video took him straight there, and that's all we need is one video. A lot of us, though, for the majority of us, it take a lot of videos for you to get into an algorithm, and I'm aware of the algorithm because I've got experience with managing my son's YouTube channel. But I'm gonna tell you like this: don't be scared of the algorithm. The algorithm is just simply what people like. That's it. It really represents your followers finding you. You just have to be consistent enough for them to find you. A lot of times, and you never know which video is going to take you to the top. So as creative as you could get creative, and just have fun and enjoy the process. But yeah, I wanted to share a little bit before I turn it in tonight about our history as human beings and how everybody share the same DNA, the same birthplace, of humanity. I know a lot of my subscribers, would argue with me about that. And if y'all don't agree, look, get into the comment section, share your thoughts. I'm all ears, yeah, so this is the definitive proof that we all derive from Africa. Everybody is black. Everybody originate. And race, the whole concept of race is a complete lie. It's not even real. Trust me. But yeah, let's get into this video. Um, I got it queued up. So yeah, man, let's get into it. Little science, you know, little genealogy. You know, I'm into things like that, and I don't know. It's just growing up not knowing, you know, hearing stories from the Bible, hearing all these different, even Islam, you know, or Nation of Islam anyway. Hearing that type of ideology, you know, white people were man, that is crazy the stuff that the Nation of Islam believe. But I can't take nothing away from my people in the Nation of Islam. That's what they believe. So, you know, belief is a strong thing. You know, it could be 100% wrong, but if a person believe it, you know, they believe it. It's real. They make it real. So, but this is the scientific proof. And y'all could just, you know, take it, you know, take it or leave it or whatever. Do what you want with it. But I just wanted to get this out there because that's what my channel, this is basically what my channel is based on. If y'all never read my description for my YouTube channel, this is what my channel is about. And so I'm staying true to that and want to, you know, basically just share what I'm interested in with y'all. And hopefully if y'all get something from this, you know, we can start to grow, man. These facts about humanity should be a baseline for us to grow, you know, period. But yeah, let's get into it. And I'm going to be skipping through this video because it's 2 hours long. So I'm not going to be listening to the whole thing. I'm just going to jump, you know, and then, yeah, and then speak about it a little bit afterward and give my insight on it.
Right now, as you're listening to this, there are over 8 billion humans scattered across every continent on Earth. We're in New York penthouses and Tokyo apartments, on farms in Kansas, and fishing villages in Norway, in the Australian outback, and the highlands of Peru. We speak 7,000 different languages.
Wow.
We look incredibly different from each other. Our cultures are staggeringly diverse. And yet, here's the thing that should absolutely blow your mind. Every single one of us, without exception, can trace our ancestry back to one continent, Africa, not Europe.
I love that thought, man. We are connected. I love it. It just, man, it just make me feel so warm inside to know. And that's why when I see us in all of us. I really do. I see us. I see my people when I see my people. You know, and man, I'm literally just trying to address this whole misconception, man, and with this information. And hopefully y'all enjoy it. But look, let's keep on going. And let me make sure my screen not frozen because it freezes up on me.
Not Asia, not some lost continent that sank beneath the waves. Africa, only Africa. Think about that for a second. Humans didn't evolve in multiple places simultaneously. We didn't pop up independently in different...
Let's bring this back, man, because I don't know if y'all appreciate.
Right now, as you're listening to this, there are over 8 billion humans scattered across every continent on Earth. We're in New York penthouses and Tokyo apartments, on farms in Kansas, and fishing villages in Norway, in the Australian outback, and the highlands of Peru. We speak 7,000 different languages. We look incredibly different from each other. Our cultures are staggeringly diverse. And yet, here's the thing that should absolutely blow your mind. Every single one of us, without exception, can trace our ancestry back to one continent, Africa, not Europe, not Asia, not some lost continent that sank beneath the waves. Africa, only Africa. Think about that for a second. Humans didn't evolve simultaneously. We didn't pop up in corners of the world like some kind of parallel evolutionary experiment. No, the entire human story, everything we are, everything we've built, everything we've achieved, All of it started in one place. And for over a century, scientists have been asking the same question. Why? Why only Africa? What made this one continent the exclusive birthplace of humanity when early primates lived all over the old world? You'd think the answer would be obvious by now. We've sequenced the human genome. We've found thousands of fossils. We've analysed ancient DNA from Neanderthals and Denisovans. We've used satellites to track climate changes going back millions of years. Surely with all this technology, all this data, we'd have figured it out. Right? Wrong. Until very recently we were missing something crucial. A final piece of the puzzle that makes everything else make sense. And that's what tonight's story is about. Now, if you're using this to fall asleep, perfect. That's exactly why I make these. So maybe hit subscribe and drop a comment telling me where you are and what time it is. I genuinely check them and it's wild. Melbourne at morning coffee.
Look, y'all do the same. Drop a comment in my comment section letting me know what time it is and where are you watching this from. Yeah, that's why I'm sharing this too, because I'm about to turn it in too in a minute. So yeah, y'all share where you're from.
Mexico City at midnight, Manchester at 3 a.m, all listening to the same story at the same time. Kind of beautiful, actually.
Yes.
Here's what we know, and this is the part that's frustrated scientists for generations. Human evolution is weird, really weird. Most animal species have a straightforward evolutionary history. They emerge in one region, they spread to similar environments. Maybe they diversify into a few related species, and eventually either thrive or go extinct. Pretty standard stuff. But humans? We're a biological paradox. We evolved from primates that lived across Africa, Europe, and Asia. Our closest relatives, chimpanzees and gorillas, are confined to small regions of Africa. Meanwhile, other primates like macaques and baboons managed to spread across multiple continents. So why did the human lineage, the one that eventually became the most successful species on the planet, only emerge in Africa? What was so special about that one place? For decades, scientists had theories, lots of theories. Maybe it was the climate. Maybe it was the landscape. Maybe it was random chance. Maybe we just haven't found the fossils from human evolution in other places yet. Each theory had some evidence supporting it, but none of them could explain everything. It was like having pieces from different jigsaw puzzles. They didn't quite fit together into a complete picture. Then, starting in 2023, everything changed. A series of groundbreaking discoveries from genetics, paleoclimatology, archaeology, and neuroscience began converging on the same answer. And suddenly, the picture became crystal clear. Scientists weren't just finding new evidence, they were finding the final piece, the one that makes all the other pieces snap into place, and reveal why human evolution could only have happened in Africa. Tonight we're going to walk through this evidence together. We're going to explore what made Africa not just a good place for human evolution, but the only place it could have happened. We'll look at recent genetic discoveries that reveal shocking truths about our ancestors' survival. We'll examine Africa's unique climate patterns that created an evolutionary pressure cooker unlike anywhere else on Earth. We'll dive into the geography that turned the continent into a natural laboratory, perfectly designed for creating intelligent, adaptable, endlessly curious creatures like us. And by the end, you'll understand something that eluded scientists for over 100 years. You'll see why every human alive today carries Africa in their DNA, in their bones, in the very structure of their brains. You'll understand why our origin story couldn't have happened anywhere else. This isn't just about where we came from, It's about understanding why we are the way we are, why we think the way we think, why we survived when countless other humans didn't. The answer has been hiding in plain sight. Something that eluded scientists for over 100 years. You'll see why every human alive today carries Africa in their DNA, in their bones, in the very structure of their brains. You'll understand why our origin story couldn't have happened anywhere else. This isn't just about where we came from. It's about understanding why we are the way we are, why we think the way we think, why we survived when countless other human species didn't. The answer has been hiding in plain sight, written in our genes, carved into the African landscape, preserved in layers of ancient sediment, and now, finally, we can read it. So let's go back, way back, to a continent that was about to forge humanity in ways we're only now beginning to understand. Before we can understand why humans evolved only in Africa, we need to establish something absolutely fundamental, something that took scientists over a century to prove beyond any reasonable doubt. We need to understand that Africa wasn't just one of several places where humans evolved. It was the place, the only place. Every single step of human evolution, from the first ape-like creatures that started walking upright to the modern humans who would eventually colonize the globe, happened in Africa. And here's the thing, this wasn't always obvious. In fact, for decades, many scientists thought human evolution happened in Asia. When the first Neanderthal fossils were discovered in Europe in the 1800s, people assumed that was where humanity started. When Peking man was found in China in the 1920s, it seemed to confirm that Asia was the cradle of humanity. Africa was barely even considered. The racism of the era made it almost unthinkable that the birthplace of humanity could be in a continent that European colonizers had dismissed as primitive.
That's, that right there, that's so striking, and it's so fitting, the first shall be last and the last shall be first. That's prophecy. And the fact that the racism wouldn't allow them to even consider Africa, everybody coming from Africa. But I would say their behavior would. Their behavior towards black people during the 1800s would say that, because you don't create a whole system to suppress somebody weak. You create an entire system to suppress somebody that is very strong. So that's the only part that I would say to this, narrator, that I think the people that invented racism knew very well who we were. I just don't think that they thought we would ever find out again who we really were. Let's continue.
But then the fossils started telling a different story. A story so clear, so undeniable, that it would completely overturn everything scientists thought they knew about human origins. The breakthrough came in 1924 when Raymond Dart, an anatomy professor in South Africa, received a box of fossils from a limestone quarry. Inside was a skull, small, childlike, but with features that didn't match any known ape. The Tang child, as it came to be known, was the first discovery of Australopithecus africanus, An ancient human ancestor that walked upright but still had an ape-sized brain. It was 8 million years old, and it had died in Africa. Dart's discovery was met with skepticism, even mockery. How could Africa be important to human evolution? But he was right. And over the next 100 years, every major discovery in human evolution would prove him right again and again. Because here's what happened next. Once scientists started looking seriously in Africa, they couldn't not just one or two lucky discoveries, spanning millions of years, and all of them told the same story. The earliest, most primitive human ancestors were in Africa. The slightly more advanced ones were in Africa. The transitional forms between apes and humans, Africa. The first tool users, Africa. The first members of our own genus, Homo. You guessed it, Africa.
Mm-hmm.
By the 1960s and 70s, the evidence was becoming overwhelming. Louis and Mary Leakey's excavations at Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania were uncovering layers of human evolution like pages in a history book. They found Homo habilis, the first species in our genus, dated to about 4 million years ago. They found stone tools alongside animal bones, evidence of butchery and food processing. They found living floors where ancient humans had camped, made tools, and eaten meals, all of it in Africa, all of it older than anything found anywhere else. Then came Lucy. In 1974, Donald Johanson and his team discovered a nearly complete skeleton in Ethiopia. Australopithecus afarensis, 2 million years old. She was small, just over 3 feet tall, but she walked upright on 2 legs. Her hip bones proved it. Her leg bones proved it. Her foot bones proved it. Lucy was a human ancestor, no question about it. And she had lived and died in the Great Rift Valley of East Africa. The Great Rift Valley. This geological feature, stretching thousands of miles from Ethiopia to Mozambique, became known as humanity's nursery, and for good reason. Nearly every major fossil discovery in human evolution has come from sites along or near the Rift Valley. It's like the Earth opened up specifically to preserve our evolutionary history. Why the Rift Valley? Because rifts create exactly the right conditions for fossilization. The geological activity brings minerals to the surface that help preserve bones. The volcanic eruptions that occur in rift zones bury sites in ash, creating
Look, I'm going to add the link to this where y'all can go watch this and fall asleep to it. And like I said, I'm about to skim through it. Let's see here. Somewhere up in here, I know it's something.
Africa. But genetic evidence isn't just about diversity. It's also about time. By analysing mutation rates and comparing genetic differences between populations, scientists can estimate when different groups split apart, and the timeline they've reconstructed matches the fossil record almost perfectly. The oldest splits in the human family tree separate different African populations from each other. San and Khoi peoples in southern Africa diverge from other African groups maybe 150,000 to 200,000 years ago. West African populations split from East African ones at various points over the last 100,000 years. Only after all these African divergences do you see the split between Africans and non-Africans, around 60,000 to 100,000 years ago. The genetic evidence is so clear that you can actually see our species' entire history written in patterns of DNA variation. And it all starts in Africa. It all points back to Africa. There is no other interpretation that makes sense. Now let's talk about the archaeological sites that preserved this incredible story. Because the physical...
Y'all hear that? And that should... These facts should bring us all together. And that's why I titled this video on my thumbnail, Everybody is Black. You see, and I said black for a reason. I didn't have to say black, but I said black because the general consensus is that black mean bad. So I want everybody to read that and internalize it, because it's some feeling that go with that word black, you know, as it relates to melanated people, people with melanin. It's feeling behind that. You feel something when somebody say black. You feel it. And so I did that intentional to, you know, to really drive home that feeling that you get when you read it. Everyone is black. It sounds profound, right? It might sound like a joke to some people. And that's what I want people to interpret it however they want to interpret it. But after they see this and get this irrefutable evidence that we all come from the same place. And that's the whole point. So if anybody reading that everybody's black and don't feel, you know, after they watch this video, that we could say everybody is anything, you know, but what we have to do, we have to denote people with this melanin as the original, no matter what word we use. And we have to, I would say, revere the original people. Treat us with the utmost respect. And I would say that, like, only, and especially our people, we need to treat ourselves with the utmost respect, because that's responsibility. When you are the foundation of humanity, you know, we have to, we're like the oldest, we're the oldest. And so we have to behave like the oldest. Just like the oldest in any relationship, we act like we're the oldest. So we have a responsibility to all of our, you know, genetically related brothers and sisters in this whole human species family. We have a responsibility to them by us being the oldest. That's not nothing to brag about. It's responsibility that come with that. And yeah, so it's nothing to, you know, laugh at nobody about. It's nothing to, it's just like with any relationship, it's responsibility that come with being the leader or the oldest, you know. So it's nothing to jost at nobody about, you know, nothing to poke at nobody about. It's a gift. I would say it's a gift. It's a gift, and when you receive a gift, you also have to give a gift. And so that's why I said the responsibility of this gift of knowledge that we have is to share it with our fellow humans, and no matter how they take it, especially with this live racism, that man, it's gonna be a whole lot of, you know, misinformed, you know, people, illogical, upset people that want to believe the exact opposite, that's going to argue with these facts. They're going to be very mad, you know, but the facts are the facts. And still, we still have a responsibility to these people. They are so misinformed. You know, I believe at this point, they'll hurt themselves before they accept the truth and the fact that everybody originated in Africa. But yeah, let me I'm gonna play a little bit more of this section, then I'm gonna go ahead.
Places where these discoveries were made aren't just random locations. They're windows into specific moments in human evolution, each one adding crucial details to our understanding of how we became human. Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania is probably the most famous. The Leakeys worked there for decades, uncovering layer after layer of human occupation dating back nearly 2 million years. The gorge cut through sediments like a knife through a layer cake. Living floors where how to track and hunt animals across vast distances. Then, a few thousand years later, the forest would return. And their descendants had to relearn forest survival all over again, except this time they still carried knowledge from the Savannah period, technologies and behaviors that could be adapted to forest conditions. Each environmental shift added to the cumulative knowledge base, creating increasingly sophisticated survival strategies. The temperature ranges were perfect for this kind of evolutionary pressure, and I mean perfect in the Goldilocks sense. Not too hot, not too cold, but just challenging enough to push our ancestors without killing them off completely. East African temperatures during this period range from about 15 to 30 degrees Celsius. That's 59 to 86 Fahrenheit for those keeping track. Warm enough that you don't need elaborate shelter or clothing to survive, but with enough variation to create seasonal challenges. Cool nights that required fire management, hot days that demanded understanding of water conservation. Compare this to other regions during the same time period. Northern latitudes were experiencing ice ages, glaciers advancing and retreating, temperatures dropping so low that survival required very specific adaptations. Thick fur, massive body size, extreme cold tolerance. These conditions produce specialists like mammoths and woolly rhinos. Impressive, but not cognitively flexible. Tropical rainforests, meanwhile, were too stable. Temperatures barely fluctuated. Food sources remained relatively constant year-round. Species in these environments became incredibly specialized to their specific niches. Amazing adaptations, but no pressure to develop general intelligence. East Africa hit the sweet spot, variable enough to prevent
Hmm.
and the timing and intensity of these seasons varied dramatically over thousands of years. During wet periods, the region would receive abundant rainfall. Rivers would swell, lakes would expand, grasslands would flourish. Animal populations would explode. For our ancestors, these were times of relative plenty. But they couldn't just relax and enjoy it, because they knew, somewhere in their cultural memory, that the dry times always returned. Dry periods could last years, even decades. Rainfall would drop dramatically. Water sources would become scattered and unreliable. The vast herds would migrate away or die off. Survival during these periods required planning, cooperation, and detailed environmental knowledge. You needed to know where the permanent water sources were. You needed to understand animal migration patterns so you could predict where food would be. You needed technologies for storing and processing food when it was available. Most importantly, you needed social systems complex enough to maintain cooperation during times of scarcity.
Got the climate. Okay, this is the geography part.
With them, spreading out across the recovered landscape, but still remaining in contact through the trade networks and kinship systems that had formed during the compression periods. The Rift Valley lakes acted as population hubs, places where human groups could survive the worst periods, exchange innovations, and then disperse when conditions improved. Think of them as evolutionary mixing bowls, bringing together different populations during crisis periods, allowing beneficial genes and ideas to mix. then releasing hybrid populations back into diverse environments during recovery periods. No other region on Earth had this combination of permanent water sources and extreme climate variability. In Eurasia, water was either too abundant, meaning populations never had to compress enough for intensive knowledge exchange, or too scarce and unreliable, meaning populations just died out during droughts rather than surviving to exchange innovations. Only in the African Rift Valley did you get this perfect balance. Enough permanent water to create refuge zones, but enough climate stress to force populations together and drive innovation. But we need to talk about the northern barrier, the Mediterranean Sea, because this played a crucial role in keeping human evolution contained in Africa during the most critical periods. Early human populations could see Europe from North Africa. On clear days, standing on the African coast, you could literally look across the water and see the European shore. Just 9 miles of water at the narrowest point. But that 9 miles might as well have been 9,000. Early humans had no boats, no rafts, no technology for crossing even narrow stretches of open water. This created a psychological pressure that might have been as important as the physical barrier. Your ancestors could see a whole other continent, tantalizingly close, potentially full of resources and opportunities, but unreachable. Imagine the frustration, the drive to find a way across. This might have been one of the key pressures driving innovation, the need to develop technologies that could overcome this visible but insurmountable barrier. And eventually they did. But not until they'd spent millions of years trapped south of the Mediterranean, millions of years developing the physical and mental adaptations that made them capable of crossing not just the Mediterranean, but eventually all of Earth's oceans. The barrier that contained them was the same barrier that refined them into a species capable of overcoming all barriers.
Geography and isolation part. This the predators and prey part. So they basically breaking down all the different pressures that forced us to evolve. And that's very important because you don't have no evolution unless you have pressures. You don't evolve comfortably. You have to evolve uncomfortably. And that's what I would say when I think about evolution. I think about the pressures that Africans and African Americans face. We are still going to be the ones to evolve. Gotta think. Well, if y'all don't know, race isn't part of evolution. It's actually almost de-evolution because you losing something as you go to these different areas of the world. You're losing certain things to adapt to the environment. Adaptation is not evolution. Adaptation is just simply with the environment that you in. But evolution, it only comes in pressures. You can only evolve with pressure to evolve. Like you have to be forced into it, and it's not nothing that's going to be comfortable. You're going to be very uncomfortable. So yeah, let's get into this to this part.
Landscape like a book written in blood and bone. And that skill, that deep understanding of animal behavior and ecology, became fundamental to human cognition. We evolved to be pattern recognizers, story builders, creatures who look at scattered evidence and construct narratives about what happened and what might happen next. That's not just useful for avoiding predators and hunting prey, it's the foundation of all human reasoning, all science, all detective work, all historical analysis. And there's one more way Africa's predators shaped human evolution: disease. Because those predators weren't just large carnivores, They were also parasites, bacteria, viruses, fungi, every microscopic organism that had evolved to exploit warm-blooded prey. Africa has more human pathogens than any other continent. Malaria, sleeping sickness, various hemorrhagic fevers, parasitic worms, bacterial infections that can kill in days. The list is staggering. This created another selection pressure as intense as the visible predators. Humans with robust immune systems survived. Those without didn't. Generation after generation, natural selection refined human immune response to handle an incredible diversity of threats. This is why populations of African descent show higher frequencies of certain immune system variants. Their ancestors needed them to survive in an environment where disease was as dangerous as any lion. But disease pressure did something else too. It rewarded social behaviors that limited pathogen transmission. Groups that developed hygiene practices, that isolated sick individuals, that understood quarantine even before they understood germ theory, those groups had higher survival rates. This might have been another driver of human intelligence, the ability to observe that people who did certain things got sick less often, to pass that knowledge along, to develop cultural practices around cleanliness and disease avoidance. All cognitively demanding tasks that required observation, memory, and the ability to make causal inferences. So, when you put it all together, Africa's predator and prey ecosystem created a perfect storm of evolutionary pressures, diverse predators demanding constant vigilance and innovation, large prey requiring cooperation and planning to hunt, both predators and prey co-evolving alongside humans, creating escalating cognitive arms races, kill sites serving as natural classrooms for learning ecology and anatomy, and disease pressure forcing the evolution of robust immune systems and hygienic cultural practices. No other continent had all these factors operating simultaneously at the same intensity for millions of years.
Let's go to this one now. And this is the cognitive revolution.
Forcing social connections that might save your life someday. This social complexity was another feedback loop. More complex societies required better communication. Better communication allowed more complex social organization. More complex organization provided survival advantages that selected social cooperation especially crucial. Unlike in some other environments where individuals or small families could survive independently, the African savanna required group coordination. Hunting large game meant working together, multiple individuals cooperating to track, surround, and kill animals much larger and stronger than any single human. Gathering also required cooperation. The best food sources were often scattered and unpredictable. Groups that shared information about where they'd found productive foraging sites did better than individuals hoarding knowledge. During dry seasons, groups that shared water sources survived when isolated individuals died of thirst. Natural selection was favoring social skills as strongly as physical abilities. Individuals who could communicate well, cooperate effectively, and maintain strong social bonds had better access to resources, better protection from threats, and more successful offspring. Over thousands of generations, this social selection was shaping the human brain just as powerfully as environmental pressures. The fossil evidence confirms this. As human brains grew larger, they weren't just getting bigger uniformly. Specific regions were expanding disproportionately. The frontal lobes, responsible for planning, decision-making, and social cognition, show the most dramatic growth. The temporal lobes, crucial for language processing, expanded significantly. The parietal lobes, important for tool use and spatial reasoning, became more developed. This is targeted evolution, natural selection, sculpting specific cognitive abilities in response to specific environmental demands, and those demands were coming from Africa's unique combination of challenges: variable climate selecting for adaptability, open grasslands requiring long-distance travel and complex spatial memory, abundant predators demanding constant vigilance and strategic thinking, rich but unpredictable food sources requiring planning and cooperation. By 200,000 years ago, when anatomically modern humans first appeared, in the fossil record they had brains that were fundamentally different from any other creature that had ever lived. Not just bigger, but reorganized, optimized for abstract thinking, language, social cooperation, and technological innovation. These were minds that could imagine things that didn't exist and then create them. Minds that could learn from the experiences of people who had died generations before. Knowledge preserved through cultural transmission. Minds that could form coalitions of hundreds or thousands of individuals bound together by shared symbols, stories, and social obligations. This was the cognitive revolution, and it happened in Africa because only Africa provided the exact combination of conditions necessary to drive it. The environmental variability that rewarded flexibility over specialization, the protein-rich ecosystem that supported expensive brain tissue, the predator pressure that made intelligence more valuable than size or strength, the open habitats that allowed tool use and fire control to provide decisive advantages, the social complexity that made language and symbolic thinking essential for survival. Every aspect of human cognition that makes us unique, every capability that separates us from our closest primate relatives, was forged in the African crucible over millions of years of natural selection.
Now we're at the final piece. Recent discovery. Do like 2 minutes of that.
The genomics, the fossils, the climate models, the archaeology, they don't just confirm that humans evolved in Africa. They explain why humans could only have evolved in Africa. Why no other continent could have produced our species. You needed the climate extremes to create the selection pressure. You needed the geographic diversity to provide refugia during crisis periods. You needed the ecological richness to reward innovation when conditions improved. You needed the specific configuration of ocean currents and atmospheric patterns that made Africa's climate uniquely variable. You needed the megafauna that forced development of sophisticated hunting strategies. You needed the disease environment that selected for robust immune systems. You needed all of it, all at once, operating together for millions of years. No other place on Earth had that combination. No other continent could have done it. Africa wasn't just where humans happened to evolve. It was the only place where we could have evolved. The final piece of the puzzle wasn't another fossil or another gene sequence. It was understanding that the puzzle could only have one solution, that every piece, every discovery, not by accident, not by coincidence, but by the fundamental laws of evolution operating in a unique environment that shaped us into what we are today. And now, Finally, we can see the complete picture. So let's address the question you're probably asking. If the conditions in Africa were so perfect for human evolution, could it have happened somewhere else? Could Asia have produced humans? Europe? What about the Americas or Australia? It's a fair question, and the answer is fascinating. Because when you actually look at the specifics, when you examine what every other continent had or didn't have during the critical period, you realize something incredible. Nowhere else on Earth could have done it, not even close. Let's start with Asia. At first glance, Asia seems promising. It's enormous, spanning multiple climate zones from tropical rainforest to Arctic tundra. It has diverse ecosystems, plenty of animals, mountain ranges, river valleys, everything you'd think would be necessary for human evolution. But here's what Asia didn't have: the right kind of instability. See, for most of the past 10 million years, Asia's climate has been relatively stable. Not unchanging, but stable in a way that didn't create the intense selection pressure necessary for rapid brain evolution. Sure, there were ice ages and warm periods, but the transitions were gradual. Populations had time to migrate, to find new territories when conditions changed. There was no forcing function, no environmental pressure cooker that demanded adapt or die on the timescale necessary to drive brain expansion. Even more importantly, Asia didn't have the right primate starting material. By the time conditions might have favored human-like evolution, the primates that had colonized Asia millions of years earlier had already specialized. They'd become langurs, macaques, gibbons, each perfectly adapted to their ecological niche. They weren't generalists anymore. They'd committed to specific survival strategies that worked great for their environments, but left no room for the kind of radical evolutionary experimentation that produced humans. And then there's geography. Asia is massive, but it's also divided. The Himalayas, the Tibetan Plateau, vast deserts. These barriers would have fragmented any proto-human population so completely that the metapopulation structure we talked about earlier, that network of connected but separated groups, couldn't have formed. Populations would have become isolated for so long they'd have specialized into different species, losing the genetic cohesion necessary for the kind of rapid evolutionary change that produced us. There's also the timing problem. By the time environmental conditions in Asia might have favored human-like evolution, Africa had already been running the experiment for millions of years. African hominins had a massive head start, and evolution isn't a race you can catch up in. Once one population gets significantly ahead in brain size and tool use, they have enormous competitive advantages that make it nearly impossible for other species to catch up. Now let's look at Europe. Europe has an even bigger problem: temperature. For most of the period when human evolution was happening in Africa, Europe was experiencing repeated glaciation cycles that made large parts of the continent uninhabitable. During peak glacial periods, ice sheets extended down to what's now London and Berlin. The habitable zones were squeezed into narrow refugia around the Mediterranean and along the Atlantic coast. These weren't conditions that favored the evolution of large-brained primates. Large brains are metabolically expensive. They require enormous amounts of calories, stable food supplies, and environments that reward intelligence over other survival strategies. Ice Age Europe rewarded physical robustness, cold adaptation, and efficient metabolism. Not the kind of environmental conditions that select for bigger brains and more complex social behavior. But here's the real kicker. Europe didn't have any great apes. When the critical period for human evolution was beginning, around 7 or 8 million years ago, there were no African ape populations in Europe to evolve from. The primate populations that did exist there were primitive by comparison, and they dramatic deterioration that preceded the ice. By the time Europe might have been suitable for human evolution, it was already too late. Africa had already produced the entire hominin lineage, and those African species were already expanding into Europe as immigrants, not evolving there independently. The Americas present an even clearer case. North and South America.
Yeah, I know. That's the part that's really gonna hurt. Hopefully it don't, like, man, these are just irrefutable facts, but I just know if y'all made it this far, and if you it don't matter who you are. A lot of black people, a lot of, people with this melanin, original men who look like these people are gonna disagree as well. A lot of y'all gonna say it don't matter. This don't matter. Like, what does it matter? We're all us. It matters. Trust me, it matters. It matters the most that we know who we are. Because even though we all look different now, we still are these people. We just look different, but we are African. We are all black. That's just a fact, man. I mean, I don't know. Like I said, I stopped it on this part because I know that part about Europe, it's going to be a whole lot of people to get in my comment and say, oh no, the Neanderthal. And trust me, bro. we effed them into us. Like, basically, yeah. We did the Epstein to them. Yeah, check it out.
Africa had no great apes at all. Not during the critical period, not ever. The closest relatives to African apes in the Americas were New World monkeys, which had diverged from our lineage something like 40 million years ago. They were separated from us by an evolutionary gulf so vast that no amount of selection pressure could have bridged it in the time frames we're talking about. Even if the climate and geography had been perfect, which they weren't, there was simply no starting material. You can't evolve humans from capuchin monkeys any more than you can evolve birds from lizards. The developmental toolkit isn't there. The genetic architecture is completely different, and by the time any great apes reach the Americas, they were already humans, already fully evolved, walking across the Bering Land Bridge around 15,000 years ago as modern Homo sapiens. The Americas also had their own timing problem. They were isolated from Africa and Eurasia for the entire period of human evolution. There was no exchange of populations, no gene flow, no opportunity for the kind of genetic mixing and competition that drove innovation in Africa. Whatever evolved there would have been on a completely separate evolutionary trajectory, and the fossil record shows us exactly what that trajectory produced. Interesting and diverse mammalian fauna, but nothing remotely approaching human intelligence.
Right.
Australia might be the most dramatic example of how isolation affects evolutionary outcomes.
Yeah.
Here's a continent that's been largely isolated for 50 million years since it broke away from Antarctica and drifted north. And what evolved there? Marsupials. Incredibly diverse, beautifully adapted marsupials that filled ecological niches similar to placental mammals on other continents, but no primates at all, not even primitive ones. The ancestors of primates never reached Australia before it separated from the other land masses, so there was literally zero chance of human evolution happening there.
Right.
The developmental starting point was missing by tens of millions of years of evolutionary divergence. You could give Australia another 100 million years of perfect conditions, and it still wouldn't evolve humans independently because the basic genetic architecture isn't there to work with. But all of this raises a deeper question. Why did only Africa have the right primates to begin with? This is where we need to talk about the primate prerequisite, and it takes us back even further in time. Around 23 to 5 million years ago, during the Miocene epoch, Africa experienced something unique. A combination of climate conditions, forest coverage, and geographic positioning that allowed primates to diversify in ways they couldn't anywhere else. The continent had extensive tropical forests that provided the complex three-dimensional environment where grasping hands, stereoscopic vision, and large brains first evolved. It also had enough climatic variability to create selection pressure for adaptability rather than over-specialization. This created what evolutionary biologists call an adaptive radiation. Primates exploded into dozens of different forms, experimenting with different body sizes, different diets, different social structures. Some became specialized leaf eaters, others focused on fruits. Still others developed omnivorous diets that required them to remember the locations of scattered food resources and coordinate with group members to exploit them efficiently. It was from this diverse community of Miocene African primates that great apes emerged. Not in Asia, not in Europe, not anywhere else, in Africa. And crucially, these early great apes retained a kind of evolutionary flexibility, a lack of over-specialization that would prove essential millions of years later when conditions began favoring even larger brains and more complex behavior. By the time the climate began shifting toward the conditions that would drive human evolution, Africa had populations of great apes that were already generalists, already comfortable on the ground as well as in trees, already living in complex social groups, already using their hands for manipulation and their brains for problem solving. They were pre-adapted, not for human evolution specifically, but for the kind of rapid evolutionary change that environmental pressure would soon demand. No other continent had this. Asia had primates, but they'd already specialized. Europe had lost its great apes. The Americas and Australia never had them at all. Only Africa had the right starting material at the right time. But even having the right primates wasn't enough. You also needed the right timing. And this is where things get really specific. The climate shifts that drove human evolution, the ones we talked about earlier, the fragmentation of forests, the expansion of grasslands, the increasing variability and unpredictability, these happened in Africa during a very specific window of time, between about 8 million and 2 million years ago. This timing mattered because it came after African apes had diversified, but before they'd become over-specialized. It came at a point when their brains were already larger than most mammals, giving them the cognitive foundation to evolve even further. It came when their social structures were already complex enough to support cultural learning and knowledge transmission across generations. In Asia, similar climate shifts happened at the wrong times, either too.
It's so weird when I hear misinformed white racist people say things like black people or African descent people are slow or are don't not intelligent, and it's like they don't realize that they owe all of everything that they know, their entire being, to our ancestors who were not only intelligent, they were evolving and forced to be intelligent, to adapt and evolve to an ever-changing world at that time. And like we're the foundation of intelligence. The foundation of it. And it's so weird, and it's such a paradox that our non-melanated little brothers in this whole evolution, that they try to flip that around. That's such a it's just like the worst case scenario that you could think of. And the only word that I could really sum it up as, it's the devil. It's a lie. It's just a whole lie. And that's where our white, our non-melanated, human species seems to be. They want to believe a lie so bad that even with this irrefutable proof, they're going to get in my comment section and they're going to argue with me. Man, that is, woo, sickening and sad. So I'm just going to play, hold on, play the end of this section, and then I'm going to, yeah, then I'm going to play the end.
Spanning the equator gave it that perfect balance. You needed geographic diversity that could fragment populations into isolated groups while still allowing occasional genetic exchange. Check. Africa's patchwork of forests, grasslands, mountains, and rift valleys provided exactly that structure. You needed predators that were dangerous enough to select for intelligence and cooperation, but not so overwhelming that they prevented ground-dwelling populations from surviving. Check. Africa had the right mix of big cats, hyenas, and wild dogs. You needed prey animals that were challenging enough to hunt, that they rewarded intelligence and tool use.
Yeah, fight or flight. That's what that is. Fight or flight was developed there. Yep. Tool usage. Everything that serves as the foundation of what it means to be a human.
Check. Africa had the most diverse and abundant megafauna on the planet. You needed all of this to continue for millions of years, long enough for multiple rounds of selection, speciation, and innovation to occur. And crucially, you needed the populations that emerged from this process to remain in contact with the source populations in Africa, allowing them to receive fresh genetic input and preventing them from becoming evolutionary dead ends. Only Africa had all of this. Only Africa could have done it. Every other continent was missing at least one critical piece of the puzzle, usually more. Asia had the wrong primates and too much stability. Europe was too cold and arrived too late. The Americas and Australia were isolated and had no great apes at all. This isn't African exceptionalism or geographic determinism. It's just the facts of biology, climate, and geography. Human evolution required a very specific set of conditions that happened to align in one place during one period of time. We didn't evolve in Africa because Africans were special. Africans are special because we evolved in Africa. Because that's where the prerequisites align.
Y'all hear that? Africans are special because we evolved in Africa. Let's listen to that again.
Climate and geography. Human evolution required a very specific set of conditions that happened to align in one place during one period of time. We didn't evolve in Africa because Africans were special. Africans are special because we evolved in Africa. Because that's where the prerequisites aligned. Because that's where the experiment could run to completion.
So he basically just said that the people weren't necessarily special. It was the place that made the people, right? Just like it was Europe that made white people. Like white people aren't special. Europe is special, Asians aren't special. Asia is special. So all these places that we went to, these places are special. You know, these places created how we look, how we think. We became perfectly adaptable to wherever we derive from. And since we are human beings derived in Africa, it was that land and that climate and all those pressures from all of the animals that was preying on us that made us create fight or flight. It was all of these different things that happened in Africa that made us. So yeah, that's a very special point that he brought up. I'm glad. Look here, I'm gonna add the link to this. We about at the end of this video. I just wanted to get this link right now. But yeah, just gonna finish it out and then give my final analysis on this.
Here's the final piece that makes this undeniable. It only happened once. In 4 billion years of life on Earth, with millions of species and countless opportunities, human-level intelligence evolved exactly one time in one place from one lineage. Not convergently in multiple locations.
It's so powerful, man. That is so powerful to know that it had to happen at that time. Timing is so crucial. And this right here, this story of how we evolved, it's the most crucial thing that allowed us to even exist today. So I'm playing this for me, but hopefully y'all get some out of this. These pressures, these circumstances, that land is what we owe all of our existence to collectively. Yeah, let's finish because I'll keep ranting. My screen froze up.
On Earth, with millions of species and countless opportunities, human-level intelligence evolved exactly one time in one place from one lineage. Not convergently in multiple locations, not in multiple groups independently discovering the same solution. Once, in Africa, from African apes. During that specific window of climatic and geographic conditions. That's not coincidence. That's evidence that what happened in Africa was extraordinarily unlikely, the result of conditions that were probably unique in Earth's history. We exist because everything aligned perfectly in one place at one time.
I call that God. That's it. And that's why I say we are God. We represent God. The closest thing to God on earth is African descent people. Dark melanin. Without all of those things happening, no humans would exist. So we all owe our existence to these originals. And so we're the closest thing to God. That's why I say, like he says, it had that one opportunity, perfect. So it was no mistake. None of us are a mistake. This is proof that we are not a mistake. None of us. We all came from a perfect design. That's God. That's all. That's the one word. These people never going to say that. They're never going to even mention God. But that's what it is in one word. All of this whole documentary represent God. So yeah, man. Wow. I'm so inspired right now.
And that place was Africa. So here we are. After everything we've explored, all the climate disasters and evolutionary pressure, all the extinct species and bottleneck events, all the predators and prey and desperate survival, we come back to the same incredible truth.
God.
Africa made us human. Not just technically, not just as a place where our species happen to evolve, but fundamentally. Every single thing that makes us human, our intelligence, our adaptability, our capacity for cooperation, our ability to create art and technology and language, all of it was forged in Africa's unique crucible. Think about what had to converge for this to happen. The climate instability that forced rapid adaptation or death, the geographic isolation that prevented our ancestors from simply migrating away when things got tough, the predator pressure that made us smarter instead of stronger, the ecological diversity that rewarded behavioral flexibility over physical specialization, the timing of it all, with each challenge arriving exactly when our ancestors were ready to respond to it. Change any one of these factors and humans probably never evolve. Move the story to Europe and our ancestors just migrate south during ice ages, never developing the adaptations that make us unique. Set it in Asia and the geographic scale is too vast, population spread out too much to maintain the selection pressure needed for rapid evolution. Put it anywhere else on Earth, and the combination of pressures just isn't right. Only Africa had everything. Only Africa could have done this. And here's what that means. Every person listening to this, wherever you are right now, whatever you look like, whatever language you speak, you are African. Not metaphorically, not symbolically, literally. Your ancestors survived that 117,000-year bottleneck. They endured droughts that lasted centuries and volcanic winters that blocked out the sun. They learned to hunt in coordinated groups and share knowledge across generations. They developed the first tools, the first art, the first abstract thinking. They carried chromosome 2 fused in the middle, marking them as survivors of the greatest crisis in human history. And then, when the climate finally improved, they spread across the world, carrying Africa with them. Every step they took, from the Rift Valley to the Arabian Peninsula, from India to China, from Siberia across the Bering Land Bridge into the Americas, they were bringing African adaptations to new environments. The relatively minor differences we see between human populations today, skin color, facial features, body proportions, these evolved in just the last 60,000 years. They're superficial adaptations to local conditions, minor variations on African themes. But the things that really matter, the cognitive abilities that let us dominate this planet, the social...
Now, that minor variations. Variations, not evolutions. Variations. Minor. So that thing that this society we live in makes so major, it's minor variation. It doesn't define nothing. Minor. Yeah. So as much as I know a lot of you racist, crazy, misinformed folks that even after watching this are going to disagree with, just keep in mind that everything you willing to put on the line is minor. It don't make nothing. It don't mean nothing. Minor. Very minor. When we all started, that was major. That was the only thing. The one thing. But everything else after, minor. Very minor.
Intelligence that lets us build civilizations, the creativity that produces art and science and philosophy, that's all African. That's all ancient. That's all shared by every human being who has ever lived. This isn't just interesting history. This is knowledge that should fundamentally reshape how we think about human diversity and human unity. When you look at another person, any person, regardless of how different they might seem, you're looking at another African, another descendant of those 1,280 survivors, another carrier of genes that were tested and refined by the harshest conditions imaginable. We are literally all family, not distant cousins but close relatives separated by just a few hundred generations. The genetic differences between any two humans are vanishingly small compared to the similarities. We share almost everything that matters, and we're still learning. Right now, right this moment, researchers across Africa are uncovering new evidence about our origins. New fossil sites in Morocco, Chad, Kenya, South Africa, each one revealing another piece of the puzzle. Genetic studies finding new evidence of ancient bottlenecks and population movements. Archaeological discoveries showing how our ancestors developed technology and culture. Africa hasn't finished teaching us about ourselves. Every year brings new revelations, new understanding of how this extraordinary continent shaped everything we are. Africa was our birthplace, but it was also our proving ground. The place where random apes became thinking beings, where survival required not just strength but intelligence, not just instinct but innovation, where the challenges were so intense that only the most adaptable, most cooperative, most creative individuals could pass on their genes. We're the result of that proving ground, every one of us. We carry Africa in our DNA, in our minds, in the very structure of our chromosomes. And that's not where our story ends. That's where it begins. Because everything humans have accomplished since leaving Africa, every civilization we've built, every technology we've invented, every work of art we've created, it's all been possible because of what Africa made us. We are all Africans. We are all survivors. We are all carrying the legacy of the greatest evolutionary story ever told. If this video gave you a new perspective on human origins and our shared heritage, hit that like button. Drop a comment telling me where you're listening from, and let's see how far across the world our African family has spread. And subscribe because there's so much more to explore about how we became who we are. Remember, every human alive today carries Africa within their DNA. We're not just from Africa. We are Africa, scattered across the world but forever connected by the journey that made us human. Now get some rest. You've earned it.
Yeah. So man, that was great. Great. Let me get this link again, add it to my video. Man, that was absolutely wonderful. So yeah, let me start off by saying by this being so ancient, we throughout, those variations of different races, different hues coming along, everybody started to, since everybody seemed to have lost the, the facts of where we all originate from, they started to create their own version of how we all were created. And that's what I think religion is. Religion, to me, after finding out these truths about these facts about where we all originate from, it kind of gave me insight on religion and the whole origin of man in a religious, context. And it kind of just tell you that religion was trying to explain where we all came from without these facts, after losing these facts. But the one thing I will say about religion, or the spirituality aspect of religion, is God. And how, just like with that narrator saying, how the perfect things happen. It's just like with this whole universe being created, something perfect happened, and that's God. So, you know, at the end of the day, like I said, if y'all watched any of my videos before, I'm not religious. I'm very spiritual though. And I believe God is perfect. You know, everything got to happen in perfect harmony in order for us to exist, in order for this world, in order for Africa to even be there in the first place, to be the perfect petri dish of evolution, the first, the perfect place for us to evolve with all those different pressures. So yeah, that's God when I think about it. You know what I mean? So that's not discrediting religion at all. It's just putting religion in its proper context for me, so I could digest it. You know, and that's what I think we all on this earth to do, is to digest, is to learn. You know, and you know, just keep evolving. You know, I believe, you know, armed with these facts, we can evolve further now. You know, because I really truly believe that racism period that we had, it was the worst de-evolution. Like, we devolved so much with that thinking, you know, regardless of all of the technology and all of that kind of stuff. Because I think a lot of that stuff, you know, a lot of this technology, what we learning now is like it was invented maliciously. It wasn't invented out of how humans invented, you know, before. Even though a lot of these technologies and things that was like, they make our lives, you know, easier, but human evolution isn't based on things being easy. So, you know, that's what I would say. Like, we kind of devolved. You know, we're not. So I think armed with this information, we can, you know, move past this dark period in human history. And I want to add, you know, for the ones that just refuse to even acknowledge this, because it's a large percentage of us that refuse to even acknowledge these facts as something that's, you know, that's valid, or let alone you know, something that's very scientific, something that you could bank on as facts. And it's all based on our belief system. You know, when people believe something so much, it don't matter what facts is in their face. If people believe racism is real, it's real. There's nothing that you can put in their face to say everybody's black and they're gonna believe it. You know, and that's just how strong belief is. And so, regardless of that, you know, for the ones that understand these concepts and able to um, not only embrace them, but, you know, not be ashamed to share this information. You know, everybody's African, like the narrator said. That's something that I think we should all be proud of, because without those different scenarios, those different pressures that happen in Africa, we would not be here. So we need to be thankful. We need to be very thankful. And, you know, like I said earlier, we need to lift the people that look like, because as y'all know, we all look like this starting out. So for the ones that still look like this, we need to be not only, you know, we should be simply revered, you know. And for those of us who do look like this, that don't know who they are, look, I would suggest that y'all learn more about who we are and be proud of it, because this whole racism period, it has harmed us more than anything. It has harmed us into believing that we are bad. Black is bad. You know, black is God. And that's what y'all have to retrain yourself into knowing. And I'm gonna say this in closing. This is something that the leaders of the free world need to start saying. All of the leaders of every nation need to be mandating that all of their citizens learn about where they originate from. this needs to be mandated, because all this rhetoric and all this made up mess that this fake racist society we live in has created, it's going to destroy us if we don't learn the true knowledge of who we are and embrace it. So we have to put this in the education sector of every nation on earth for people to learn who they really are and to embrace it. Because this lie and this notion that Africa is bad and all this stuff they put in this religious text, you know, a lot of these religious doctrines, they don't say it in the Bible, don't say it in the Quran, they don't say it in none of these like real religious texts, but a lot of the people along the way have picked up on the notion and the lie that African equals bad. And y'all got to learn, without Africa, you don't have life. So not only is Africa good, it's the only great thing that ever happened to humanity. It's the only great thing, because we wouldn't have life without it. So yeah, man, yeah, all the leaders and these Americans, these American politicians, they going further and further and further away from it. It's sickening. But that's why I was inspired to create this video. And if y'all got anything out of it, share this with your people. Share this with your loved ones. Share this with your children, especially as they learn and as they growing. You know, this perfect time to share with them. Yeah, you African. You know, tell your white kids, you African. Be proud of that. No matter how much wrong that they learn about Africa, break that cycle. You know what I'm saying? So look, I'm out of here. Thank y'all for watching, and click this video right here and tune in to the content that I have about the former Black Panther, who has a powerful message for our people. So, and when I say our people, I'm talking about all Americans, and you can apply this to the whole world with the trying times that we have right now. Click on this video to tap in with that. All right, I'm out of here. Marlon Speaks Live 1. Yo, it's Marlon Speaks Live. Yeah, I'm saying what they hide. History uncensored, let the real survive. Yeah, it's truth over comfort, I don't pick no side. If it shake the room a little, let the truth collide. Cause it's Marlon Speaks Live. No script, no disguise. I don't sell no lies, just to monetize. Cause the past still breathing and it never dies. Yeah, it's Marlon Speaks Live. Now the truth will rise. Yo, it's Marlon Speaks Live. Yeah, I'm saying what they hide. History uncensored, let the real survive.